If you don't like my friend's rude jokes, you can just pay and leave. The restaurant fell into an eerie silence, as if someone had just announced a death. 6 pairs of eyes locked onto me, waiting for my reaction. I felt my heart pounding against my custom-tailored shirt as Maya's words echoed in my head. The woman I'd shared my bed with for 6 months had just told me, in front of her giggling friends, that my feelings were worth less than the overpriced cocktails they were downing at my expense. I looked down at my barely touched 300 Wagyu steak, the red meat now as cold as the expression in Mia's eyes. For a split second, I saw us reflected in the polished silverware. Her, confident and dismissive. Me, a walking wallet she'd grown tired of opening. "Check, please," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane raging inside me. I pulled out my platinum card and handed it to the waiter without looking at the total. "Cover everything they've ordered tonight, everything." As I signed the receipt with a flourish, adding a tip bigger than most people's weekly grocery bill, I caught a flicker of something in Mia's eyes. Confusion? Regret? It didn't matter anymore. I'd been a fool for 6 months, but I wouldn't be a fool for one more minute. "Enjoy your evening," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket with deliberate precision. Then looking directly at Mia, I added, "All of it's paid for. That's what you wanted, right?" I walked out without waiting for her response, the cool Manhattan night air hitting my face like a well-deserved slap. But what Mia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly understand, was that I, Thomas Harrison, didn't just negotiate multi-million-dollar deals for a living. I settled scores, and I was just getting started. 6 months earlier, I was delivering the closing argument in a $200 million merger when I first spotted Mia Parker. While everyone else in the conference room was frantically taking notes, she was lounging in the back row, scrolling through her phone with the casual disinterest of someone who knew they were the most important person in any room. "I'm Tom Harrison, senior partner at Bergman & Associates, one of New York's most ruthless M&A law firms. At 30 Vive, I'd already closed deals that made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. My reputation was simple. I never lost. Whether in a boardroom or a courtroom, I was the guy you called when failure wasn't an option. That day, I was wearing a $12,000 Tom Ford suit and wielding clauses and subclauses like surgical instruments, dissecting the opposition's arguments with clinical precision. I just delivered the line that would seal the deal. "Gentlemen, this isn't a negotiation, it's a formality." When I noticed her looking up from her phone, those amber eyes meeting mine with what seemed like genuine interest. After the meeting concluded and hands were shaken, she approached with a confident stride that matched the boldness of her floral dress in a room full of navy suits. "That was quite a performance," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Mia Parker, I'm covering the men behind the money for my platforms." Her handshake was firm, her smile measured. Practiced, I'd later realize. Up close, I noticed how her eyes changed color under the fluorescent lights, shifting from amber to honey to something close to gold. "Tom Harrison," I replied, intrigued despite myself. "What platforms would those be?" She laughed, a sound both practiced and surprisingly genuine. "You really don't know. I have 3 million followers across my channels. I'm kind of a big deal in the lifestyle space." There was something refreshing about her directness in a world where everyone spoke in carefully constructed paragraphs designed to reveal nothing. "I'd like to interview you," she continued, pulling out her phone. "My audience would eat up your whole—" She gestured vaguely at me. "Power lawyer aesthetic. Plus, I've never featured someone who could destroy a man's career with a semicolon." I found myself agreeing before I'd even processed the request. That wasn't like me. I analyze everything, consider all angles, anticipate weaknesses. But with Mia, I just said yes. Our first interview over coffee turned into dinner at Le Bernardin. Dinner led to drinks at a speakeasy in the East Village I didn't know existed. Drinks led to a sunrise walk along the Hudson River, where she took photos of the light reflecting off the water and explained the difference between content and storytelling. "Anyone can post a pretty picture," she said, showing me the image she'd just captured. "But this tells a story about the city waking up, about possibilities, about new beginnings." By the time she finished that sentence, she was looking at me instead of her phone. 2 weeks later, she moved into my Tribeca apartment. Living with Mia was like trying to contain a supernova within four walls. Brilliant, unpredictable, and occasionally destructive. She transformed my minimalist space into something from an architectural digest spread, complete with absurd throw pillows that seemed to multiply when I wasn't looking, and art pieces that cost more than my first car. Your place was so boring, and she declared when I questioned the sudden appearance of a neon pink ottoman in my living room. It looked like a fancy hotel room no one actually lives in. My life, previously governed by the predictable rhythm of court dates and client meetings, now included impromptu photo shoots in our kitchen and mysterious packages arriving daily, products from companies hoping for a mention on our platforms. When you would come home after 14-hour days of negotiating contract terms, I'd find her bathed in ring light, talking to her phone about the transformative properties of some overpriced face cream or the sustainable luxury of 900 sneakers. But there was magic in it too. Mia lived entirely in the present. While I was planning 5 years ahead, calculating risks and returns, she was extracting every ounce of joy from the current moment. She dragged me to underground art shows in converted warehouses, hole-in-the-wall restaurants with food that made me reconsider my understanding of flavor, and rooftop parties with people whose names I'd seen in magazines but never expected to meet. "You work so hard making money," she told me once, as we watched the sunrise from a Brooklyn rooftop after a night I hadn't planned. "But you forget to enjoy spending it." She wasn't wrong. Before Mia, my idea of splurging was upgrading to first class or buying an expensive watch. She taught me that money could buy experiences, not just status symbols. Sex with Mia was like nothing I'd experienced before. She approached it with the same uninhibited enthusiasm she brought to everything else. In my previous relationships, intimacy had been pleasant but predictable. With Mia, it was a constantly evolving adventure. "Has anyone ever told you that you make love like you're following a legal brief?" she asked one night, early in our relationship. Section 1, remove clothing. Section 2, perform foreplay for exactly 7 minutes. Section 3, proceed to main event. I was offended at first, but she just laughed and proceeded to show me exactly what she meant. After that night, I never approached our bedroom with a strategy again. By month 3, I was in deeper than I'd ever been with anyone. I found myself checking my phone during depositions, smiling at her text. Senior partners noticed. One even pulled me aside after I rescheduled a client meeting to accompany Mia to a product launch. "Harrison, you're one of our best," said Howard Bergman himself, his weathered face creased with concern. "But you've been distracted lately. Don't let a pretty face derail what you've built. I've seen it happen to men twice as smart as you." I assured him everything was fine, and professionally it was. I was still closing deals, still putting in the hours. But for the first time, work wasn't everything. I was planning weekends around Mia's schedule, considering her indecisions I'd previously make alone. One night as we lay in bed, Mia scrolling through comments on her latest post while I reviewed a contract, she asked without looking up, "Do you think you could ever leave New York?" "For a client? Sure, temporarily," I replied, highlighting a clause that needed revision. "No, I mean to live. My followers are really responding to my travel content. I'm thinking of becoming more nomadic." I looked up from my work. "You mean just travel indefinitely?" She shrugged, still scrolling. "Why not? I can work from anywhere. And you're already loaded. You could probably retire now if you wanted." "Retire?" I almost laughed. "I'm 35, Mia. I'm just hitting my stride." "But imagine the places we could see together," she said, finally putting down her phone. "Bali, Tokyo, Santorini. You could do remote consulting or something." "Remote consulting isn't really a thing in high-stakes M&A law," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Clients pay for FaceTime." "So get different clients," she suggested, as if changing the foundation of my career was as simple as switching coffee brands. "Or just live off your investments. Don't tell me you haven't saved enough to never work again." The conversation moved on, but the question lingered in my mind. Was she testing the waters, seeing how committed I was? The lawyer in me recognized a preliminary negotiation when I heard one. But that's the thing about Mia. Just when I thought I understood her angle, she'd surprise me. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen making pancakes shaped like little briefcases. For my favorite legal eagle, she said, sliding a plate toward me with a smile that made my chest tighten. I thought you wanted me to retire and become a nomad, I teased. She looked genuinely confused. When did I say that? That was Mia, living so completely in each moment that yesterday's conversations sometimes seemed to evaporate from her memory. It was around month 4 when I started noticing the financial imbalance. Mia made money from sponsored posts and brand partnerships, but it was irregular. Meanwhile, she'd developed expensive tastes that aligned with her online persona. These influencer events are important networking, she explained when I questioned a $700 outfit for a product launch. Would you go to court in a cheap suit? She had a point. Image was currency in her world, just as reputation was in mine. So I covered more than my share of our expenses. Rent, utilities, dinners, weekend getaways that she'd document for her followers. I didn't mind, not really. I could afford it, and seeing her happy gave me a satisfaction I couldn't quite explain. But sometimes, in quiet moments alone, I'd wonder if I was being smart or just being used. Then came the moment that should have been my warning. We were having dinner at Daniel to celebrate a major deal I'd closed, a hostile takeover that had made the front page of every financial publication and added 3 new clients to my portfolio. Mia was wearing a dress I'd never seen, something that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The red material clung to her body in a way that made heads turn when we entered the restaurant. "Do you like it?" she asked, twirling as the maitre d' led us to our table. "The brand sent it over this morning." During dinner, she spent more time taking photos of the food than eating it. When I gently suggested she put the phone away, she looked at me like I'd suggested she stop breathing. "This is literally my job, Tom. This dinner will reach hundreds of thousands of people." "I thought this dinner was about us celebrating," I said, trying to keep the annoyance from my voice. She reached across the table and patted my hand. "It can be both, babe. Multitasking." Later that night, as she edited photos in bed, I asked casually, "Do you ever post anything that's just for you, not for the followers?" She looked up, genuinely puzzled. "What would be the point of that?" I should have recognized it then, the fundamental difference in how we viewed the world. For me, private moments were treasured. For Mia, nothing was real until it was shared, validated by likes and comments. But I was in too deep to see clearly. When she suggested we take a luxury vacation to the Maldives, "It's the backdrop I need for this resort wear campaign," I agreed, even though it meant rescheduling, client meetings, and delegating important work. The vacation was a disaster. Mia spent each day orchestrating elaborate photo shoots on the beach, changing outfits multiple times, examining each image with meticulous scrutiny. "Could you take this one again? The lighting's all wrong," she said for the 20th time, handing me her phone. I was no longer her boyfriend, but her personal photographer, assistant, and bag carrier. When I suggested we actually enjoy the crystal clear water or have a meal without documenting it, she accused me of not supporting her career. On our last night, as we sat at a romantic dinner I'd arranged, complete with private chef and beachside table, she spent the entire time responding to comments on her latest post. "Mia," I finally said, setting down my fork, "I'm right here." She glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "I know where you are, Tom. I have eyes." "Do you? Because it feels like I'm having dinner alone." She sighed dramatically. "This post is getting massive engagement. Do you know how much I'll be able to charge for sponsorships after this trip? We should be celebrating." That's interesting," I said, the lawyer in me picking apart her word choice. "This trip was supposed to be about us, but it's been entirely about you and your content." "Oh my God," she rolled her eyes. "Not everything is a deposition, Tom. Can you stop being a lawyer for 5 seconds? Can you stop being an influencer for 5 seconds? I countered. She put her phone down then, but not in concession. Her eyes narrowed. "You knew who I was when we met. This is my career, my passion. If you wanted some traditional girlfriend who just gazes adoringly at you all day, you picked the wrong woman." The argument escalated from there. Words were said that couldn't be unsaid. By the time we returned to New York, something had shifted between us. The hurricane was now aimed directly at me. Things deteriorated over the following weeks. We were together but increasingly separate. I threw myself into work, taking on more cases than necessary. Mia expanded her social calendar, often coming home in the early hours smelling of expensive perfume and other people's cigarettes. One night after a particularly grueling day in court, I came home to find our apartment filled with people I'd never met, models, photographers, and what Mia called content creators, all drinking my rare Japanese whiskey and lounging on furniture I'd paid for. Surprise, Mia said, floating over to me in a dress that seemed to be made primarily of cutouts. We're celebrating Zach's new skincare campaign. Zach, whoever he was, raised a glass of my $400 whiskey in acknowledgement. A little warning would have been nice, I said quietly, loosening my tie. Don't be such a buzzkill, she whispered, her smile never faltering. These are important connections. I retreated to our bedroom only to find a couple I didn't know using my bathroom to do lines of cocaine off the marble countertop. When I told them to get out, the woman looked at me like I was the help. Mia said we could use any room, she said, sniffing and wiping her nose. I kicked them out and locked the door, then texted Mia, get everyone out in 20 minutes or I'm calling building security. She appeared 5 minutes later, face flushed with anger. Are you serious right now? These are my friends. They're not friends, they're parasites, I said beyond caring about diplomacy. And they're doing drugs in our bathroom. God, you're such a square, she said, then saw my expression and quickly added, fine, I'll wrap it up. But you're being really uncool about this. By the time the last guest left, it was past midnight, and our apartment looked like it had been ransacked. Spilled drinks, cigarette burns on the couch, and what looked suspiciously like vomit in a potted plant. See, all gone, Mia said, as if she deserved praise for doing the bare minimum. This isn't working, I said, surveying the damage. We need to talk about boundaries. Sure, tomorrow, she yawned, heading toward the bedroom. I'm too tired now. But tomorrow never came. There was always an event, a deadline, a crisis with a brand deal that took precedence. We were two people living parallel lives that occasionally intersected but never merged. Then came the invitation. One of Mia's influencer friends was celebrating a major cosmetics contract at some trendy new restaurant in Soho. Mia wanted me to come. You should meet my friends properly, she said, as if we hadn't been together for half a year. They think you are some mythical creature I invented. I should have declined. I had a major case closing, paperwork that needed my attention. But some part of me, the part that still remembered the thrill of her laugh, the warmth of waking up beside her, agreed. The restaurant was exactly what I expected. Overpriced, overdesigned, and filled with beautiful people taking photos of food going cold. Mia's friends were a collection of similarly curated individuals. Women with perfect hair and men with carefully cultivated facial hair, all glued to their phones. I was introduced around the table. This is Tom, my lawyer boyfriend, Mia said, making me sound like an accessory she'd picked up at Barney's. The conversation revolved around topics I knew nothing about: engagement rates, algorithm changes, upcoming collaborations. I tried to participate, asking questions that were met with pitying looks. So you just sue people all day? Asked one woman, Amber or Ember, I couldn't remember, her tone suggesting she was addressing a child. Not exactly. I began to explain the complexities of mergers and acquisitions, but her eyes glazed over within seconds. God, that sounds so boring, said a man with more jewelry than I'd ever owned, cutting me off. Don't you ever just want to, live? Mia laughed along with everyone else. I felt my jaw tighten but forced a smile. Ryan's right, said another woman, whose name I'd already forgotten. I could never do something so rigid. Don't you feel trapped in all those suits? Actually, I find the work quite stimulating, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. The intellectual challenge, mimicked the jewelry guy, Ryan apparently. Listen to him. Mia, does he talk like this in bed too? I find your body quite stimulating. The intellectual challenge of locating the clitoris. The table erupted in laughter. I felt heat rise to my face, not from embarrassment, but anger. I looked to Mia, expecting her to intervene, to show some loyalty. Instead, she was laughing the loudest. You guys stop, she said, not meaning it at all. Tom's not that robotic. He's actually very thorough. More laughter, more jokes at my expense. Comments about how I probably organized my sock drawer by color. Questions about whether I had to schedule spontaneity weeks in advance. Do you bill Mia by the hour? Ryan asked, smirking. Is that why she's always checking the time when you're together? That struck a nerve. Mia had indeed been distant lately, always rushing through our increasingly rare moments together. I bet he makes her sign an NDA before they have sex, added another voice. Isn't that what all you corporate types do now? Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the laughter, an NDA would be useless in this context. What you're thinking of is a non-disparagement agreement, which would prevent Mia from doing exactly what she's doing now, allowing people to ridicule her partner for cheap entertainment. The table went quiet for a moment, then Ryan leaned forward. Whoa, lawyer man has claws. Did we hurt your feelings? I turned to Mia again, my expression making it clear I'd had enough, but she was busy adjusting the placement of drinks for a photo. Mia, I said quietly, could we maybe change the subject? She looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Why? They're just joking around. At my expense, I pointed out, it's getting a bit old. The table had quieted, everyone watching our exchange with the avid interest of spectators at a tennis match. Oh my God, Mia sighed dramatically. They're just having fun. Not everything has to be so serious. I'm not asking for serious, just a little respect. Ryan snorted. Respect has to be earned. Suit. I ignored him, keeping my eyes on Mia. Could you just have my back here? These are your friends, and they're being rude. That's when she said it, with a dismissive flick of her wrist and an eye roll that made it clear exactly where I stood in her estimation. If you don't like my friend's rude jokes, you can just pay and leave. The table fell silent, 6 pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting for my reaction. Mia's perfectly manicured hand was still raised mid-gesture, her face showing not the slightest hint of regret. I looked down at my $300 steak, barely touched. The fancy restaurant's ambient lighting suddenly seemed too harsh, the music too loud. My silk tie felt like it was choking me. All right, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I reached for my wallet, pulled out my platinum card, and signaled the waiter. Check, please. The bill came, over $2,000 for premium drinks and barely touched entrees. I added a generous tip, signed with a flourish, and stood up. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I said to the table at large, then looked directly at Mia. All of it's covered, including the drinks they ordered before we arrived. Her expression flickered. Surprise, confusion, perhaps a touch of remorse. But I didn't wait to analyze it. I turned and walked out, the cool night air hitting my face like a wake-up call. In the cab ride home, my mind, trained through years of legal education and practice to see patterns, to recognize leverage points, began to work. Mia had unknowingly made a proposition, and I had accepted the terms. By the time I reached our apartment, a plan had formed. I packed an overnight bag and checked into the Four Seasons. Then I made a call to my assistant, Daniel, who was used to my odd hours and exacting instructions. I need you to prepare some documents, I began, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, and I need them ready by morning. Mia returned to the apartment around 2 a.m. According to the doorman who texted me, we'd developed a good relationship after I helped him with a tenant dispute pro bono. She called me 4 times, sent 7 increasingly angry texts. Where are you? Are you seriously throwing a tantrum? This is so childish, Tom. Fine, be that way. I'm going to sleep. Actually, I can't sleep because you're being weird. Call me. Hello? Whatever. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I was working with Daniel via email, preparing what would become the most precisely calculated response of my career. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m., when I knew Mia would be waking up, she never rose before 9, claiming early mornings were for people without passion, Daniel hand-delivered an envelope to our apartment. Inside was a letter on my firm's official letterhead, along with a meticulously detailed spreadsheet. The letter read, Dear Ms. Parker, in accordance with the verbal agreement established on the evening of June 15, 2023, wherein you stated the terms of our relationship as pay and leave, I am hereby providing a comprehensive accounting of shared expenses incurred during our cohabitation period of January 10th, 2023 to June 15th, 2023. As you will note in the attached documentation, I have previously covered 100% of our joint expenses, including but not limited to residential rent and utilities for the property at 415 Greenwich Street, 7B. All dining experiences shared. Itemized on pages 2-5. Travel expenses for our trips to Miami, Aspen, and the Maldives. Miscellaneous shared purchases, including home furnishings, entertainment subscriptions, and transportation services. Given your clarification of terms, last evening I am requesting reimbursement for your 50% share of these expenses, totaling $126,742.58. This figure has been calculated with consideration for your occasional contributions and excludes any purchases I made solely for my personal use. Please remit payment within 30 days to avoid the necessity of further legal action. My assistant can provide various payment options at your convenience. Sincerely, Thomas Harrison, Bergman and Associates, LLP. Postscript. Mia, since you've clearly established the financial paradigm of our relationship as pay and leave, I'm simply applying this principle retroactively to our entire period of cohabitation. I've already handled the leave portion. The pay part is now in your hands. Tom. I knew exactly what would happen next. Mia, who spent money as easily as she breathed but had never once checked her bank account balance in my presence, would panic. The amount, while technically accurate, would seem astronomical to someone who lived on sponsored posts and free products. At 9:17 a.m., my phone exploded with notifications, calls, texts, even an email. Mia never emailed. I let them all go unanswered as I prepared for a meeting with a client. At 10:30 a.m., she appeared at my office, something she'd never done before. My assistant, following my instructions, told her I was unavailable but offered her a seat in the waiting area for as long as necessary. She waited for 3 hours. When I finally emerged from my genuine meeting, I nodded to Daniel, who promptly left, closing the door behind him. Mia looked different. Her usually perfect makeup was minimal, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater, her real person clothes, as she called them, reserved for days when she wasn't creating content. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving the letter. "I believe the document is self-explanatory," I replied, leaning against my desk. "You established terms. I'm complying." "This is insane. Over $100,000? You can't be serious." "I'm always serious about financial agreements, Mia. That's literally my job." She paced the office, her composure cracking. "This is because I didn't defend you against a few jokes? You're this petty?" "No," I said calmly. "This is because last night made something very clear to me. You see me as an ATM with a pulse. You've been happy to let me fund your lifestyle, but when it came time to show basic respect, you couldn't be bothered." "That's not fair. I never asked you to pay for everything." "Didn't you? Tom, this restaurant would be perfect for my feed. Tom, my followers would love content from the Maldives. Tom, I need this dress for an event." You never explicitly asked, but you created situations where my payment was the assumed outcome. She stopped pacing, her face flushed. "So what? This is some kind of revenge?" "This is clarity," I corrected. "For 6 months, I've been investing, financially and emotionally, in someone who sees me as a convenient resource. Last night, you made it clear that not only do you not respect me, but your friend's entertainment is more important than my dignity." "They were just joking around," she protested, but it sounded weak even to her ears. "No," I said firmly, "they were belittling me, and you were enjoying it. If the situation were reversed, if my colleagues were mocking your career, calling your work vapid and meaningless, would you have found it so amusing?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I don't actually expect you to pay this," I continued, softening my tone slightly. "Consider it an itemized receipt for a relationship that apparently meant very different things to each of us." "So what now?" she asked, her voice small. "You're breaking up with me over one bad night?" "I'm acknowledging that we want different things. You want an audience and a sponsor. I want a partner." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the spreadsheet with its meticulously calculated figures. Then, unexpectedly, she started to cry. Not the pretty, photogenic tears she'd sometimes use in emotional posts, but ugly, messy sobbing. "I didn't mean it," she said between gasps. "I was just trying to look cool in front of them. They're not even my real friends." I handed her a box of tissues, unmoved. I'd seen Mia turn emotions on and off like a faucet when it suited her purposes. "If they're not your real friends, why do you care what they think?" I asked. Because they have influence, connections. They can help my career or destroy it. "So you sacrificed our relationship for networking?" She looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "That's not fair. You don't understand how my world works." "I understand perfectly," I said. "Your world runs on appearances, and I no longer fit the aesthetic you're cultivating." "That's not true. I cared about you. I still care about you." "I believe you," I replied, and I did. In her way, within the limits of her self-absorbed worldview, she probably had cared. But caring isn't enough when there's no respect. She wiped her eyes, smearing makeup across her face. "So that's it? 6 months and you're just done?" "6 months of increasingly realizing we have fundamentally different values," I corrected. "Last night wasn't an anomaly, Mia. It was a culmination." "What about our apartment? All my stuff is there." "It's your apartment now," I said. "I've paid the rent through December. Consider it a parting gesture." Her eyes widened. "You're just giving me the apartment?" "I'm giving myself peace of mind. Worth every penny." She stood there, clutching the letter, looking suddenly lost. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of someone else, not the curated persona she presented online, but a young woman realizing she'd miscalculated badly. "You should go," I said gently. "I have another meeting." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about last night. They were being jerks." "Yes, they were," I agreed. "And you let them be." She nodded, accepting this truth. "Will you call me? Maybe when you're less angry?" I considered lying, offering false hope, but she deserved at least this honesty. "No, Mia, I won't." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the city skyline through my office window. I'd spent years building a life focused on achievement, security, forward progress. Mia had brought chaos and color, and a kind of reckless joy I'd never experienced. But she'd also brought a profound loneliness. The special kind that only exists when you're with someone who doesn't really see you. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "I never meant to hurt you." Perhaps that was true, but intent doesn't erase impact, as I often told clients dealing with contract breaches. The damage was done not in a single evening, but in a pattern of behavior that revealed a fundamental truth. I was valuable to her primarily as a resource, not as a person. The aftermath was messy, as breakups often are. Mia launched a social media campaign portraying herself as the victim of a cold-hearted lawyer who calculated love like a business transaction. Her followers flooded my professional accounts with angry comments. One particularly zealous fan even called the firm, demanding they fire me for emotional cruelty. Howard Bergman called me into his office after that incident. "Care to explain why we're getting death threats from teenage girls?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. I gave him the abbreviated version of events. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, then laughed, a rare sound from a man known for his stoicism. "Harrison, I've been married for 40 years and I've never figured out women completely. But one thing I know, never date someone who values attention more than connection." "Lesson learned," I assured him. "Good. Now about this Johnson merger." And just like that, life returned to its ordered rhythm. I worked late, won cases, added clients. On the surface, everything was back to normal. Except it wasn't. Mia had changed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I found myself noticing things I'd previously overlooked. The quality of light at different times of day, the specific blue of the sky after a rainstorm, the subtle variations in the crowd at my favorite coffee shop. 2 weeks after our breakup, I received a call from an unknown number while in court. I ignored it, but the same number called again immediately after. Stepping into the hallway, I answered. Is this Thomas Harrison? A female voice asked. Speaking. This is Jenny Reed from The Lifestyle. I'm calling about your relationship with Mia Parker. I nearly hung up, but something made me ask, what about it? She's been making some interesting claims on social media. We'd like to get your side before we run our story. No comment, I said automatically. Mr. Harrison, she's claiming you monitored her spending, controlled her movements, and are now blackmailing her with financial threats. These are serious allegations. I felt a cold fury unlike anything I'd experienced in a courtroom. Send me the specific claims. My attorney will contact you within the hour. I called Daniel immediately. I need you to pull every receipt, every text message, every email between Mia and me, and get me Simon Bennett on the phone. Simon was our firm's top defamation lawyer, a man who'd made media outlets retract stories with a single phone call. By that afternoon, we had compiled a comprehensive record of my relationship with Mia, including texts where she asked for money, receipts for gifts she'd requested, and social media posts where she'd bragged about the lifestyle we enjoyed. Simon called the Lifestyle's legal department. I wasn't privy to the conversation, but the story never ran. Instead, the publication posted a neutral statement about the end of a relationship between influencer Mia Parker and prominent attorney Thomas Harrison. That evening, I received another text from Mia. You didn't have to threaten them with a lawsuit. I replied, for the first time since our breakup, I didn't threaten anyone. I simply provided evidence of the truth. My career is tanking because of you, she wrote back immediately. Brands are dropping me. Your career is tanking because you lied, I corrected. Actions have consequences, Mia. She didn't respond, but the next day she posted a vague apology on her platforms, claiming that emotions got the better of me, and she may have exaggerated certain aspects of our relationship. Her followers seemed confused, but the damage to her reputation was already done. Several brands publicly ended their partnerships with her, citing values alignment issues. 3 weeks later, I was finalizing paperwork on a major acquisition when Daniel knocked on my door. Sir, there's a delivery for you. He handed me a small package and a handwritten note. The package contained a check for $10,000, a fraction of the amount from my itemized list, but more than I ever expected to receive. The note read, Oikya, Tom, this is all I can afford right now. I sold some bags and jewelry. I know it's not the full amount, but it's a start. You were right about a lot of things. I didn't respect what we had. I took you for granted. The apartment feels empty without your boring legal books and the way you hum when you make coffee. My friends haven't called since that night. Turns out when you're not picking up the check, you're suddenly less interesting to people like them. I cry myself to sleep most nights thinking about how cruelly I treated you. The way I let them mock you haunts me. You were the only person who ever truly cared about me, not my follower count, not my influence, not what I could do for them. You loved me, and I was too blinded by validation from strangers to see it. I look in the mirror now and barely recognize the shallow, selfish person I became. I don't expect you to forgive me or take me back, but I wanted you to know that you taught me something important about value, what has it and what doesn't. Mia postscript, I'm getting a real job. Social media isn't working out anyway. The algorithm changed again. I put the check in my desk drawer, never intending to cash it. The money had never been the point. Later that evening, as I worked late at the office, a habit I'd fallen back into without the hurricane of Mia pulling me toward other experiences, I received a notification on my phone. It was from Instagram, an app I rarely used. Mia had posted something and tagged me. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was a simple photo of our apartment, my half now conspicuously empty. The caption read, reality check. Sometimes the most expensive thing in life is learning what really matters. No filter can fix genuine mistakes. Hashtag growing up. Hashtag accountability. The comments were a mix of confusion from her followers. Where's all the stuff from your apartment tour? And supportive platitudes from strangers. She disabled branded content tags, a first in all the time I'd known her. I closed the app without responding or liking the post. Whatever journey Mia was on now, it was separate from mine. But I felt a surprising lightness, a sense that perhaps she had learned something valuable from our time together, just as I had. My phone rang. It was Daniel. Sir, Mr. Bergman wants to know if you're interested in heading up the new office in Chicago. They need someone to lead the expansion, and he specifically requested you. I looked around my office, at the life I'd built so carefully. For a moment, I imagined what Mia would say. Probably something about the Chicago food scene being totally underrated on social, or how the light off Lake Michigan would be perfect for content. But Mia wasn't part of this decision. For the first time in months, I was thinking only of what I wanted. Tell him I'm interested, I said. And Daniel, book me a flight to Chicago for this weekend. I want to see the city, not just the inside of office buildings. Of course, sir. Anything else? I thought of Mia's check sitting in my drawer. Yes, donate $10,000 to the Legal Aid Society, anonymous donor. Right away, sir. As I hung up, I realized I was humming the same tune I apparently hummed while making coffee. I hadn't even known I did that until Mia's note mentioned it. The next morning, I see Mia's face on the local news. The headline shocked me. Social media star hospitalized after breakdown. According to the reporter, she'd been found disoriented, walking barefoot through Central Park at 3 a.m., sobbing uncontrollably about losing everything that mattered. Part of me wanted to reach out, to make sure she was okay. I even had my phone in hand, her number on the screen. But then I remembered the fundamental truth we'd both learned. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions alone. That's how real growth happens. It's strange the things other people notice about us that we never see ourselves. Stranger still are the lessons we learn from people who come into our lives briefly but leave lasting marks. Mia had taught me to live more in the moment. I had taught her something about consequences. Fair exchange, no robbery. Case closed.